Welcome into another episode of In the Bonus. My name is Jorie Mickens, and it is now Thursday morning, about 1 a.m. Just got done watching a few matchups of the playoffs. The two games that I'm going to be talking about today are the New York Knicks, Atlanta Hawks, Game 2, and the Memphis Grizzlies and the Utah Jazz Game 2. Both series got evened up at 1-1 after these games. And guys, I finally took notes on these games, so they're going to be this episode is probably going to be a lot more thorough than the last two that I've done for the playoffs. But let's begin with the Eastern Conference matchup of the night. And yes, there was another game tonight. The Wizards played the Sixers. The Sixers won that game 120-95. So I didn't really watch that game just because I was focused on these two games. I was focused watching the Knicks Hawks during that time. So I don't really have anything to say with that game. I guess the only thing that I did see from that game was an incident that happened as Russell Westbrook was leaving the court or leaving the game. And as he was entering the tunnel, popcorn fell from the stands, and it was obviously found that a fan had dropped popcorn on Russell Westbrook as he was leaving the game, and that obviously ticked him off quite a bit. I mean, it would piss me off a lot if that happened to me. And that fan was ejected from the game. I mean, it's just that was just really frustrating to see. I mean, I love having fans back in the stadiums, and playoff crowds is something I'll probably talk about at one point during this episode, but that's just unacceptable. It's just ridiculous. I can't believe a fan would even think to do something like that. It's just so idiotic. And I hope that fan never, ever, I don't know who it is, but I hope they are never allowed to attend another Sixers game again, because that's just ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, now moving on to the two games that I did watch, the New York Knicks versus the Atlanta Hawks. And again, obviously I'll get into the Jazz-Grizzlies game a little bit later. But to begin, New York is back. The Knicks getting their first playoff win since May 16th, 2013. That's incredible. I mean, it's cool to say that I got to watch that. I mean, their first win in over 8 years. It's just really an incredible feat that I got to watch. But it was not an easy game for the Knicks whatsoever. But I guess to begin, every time Trae Young got the ball, and this was kind of what happened in Game 1. Every time Trae Young got the ball, he was booed by that MSG crowd. But he did start off the game making his first three, and Atlanta actually opened the game shooting 4 of 9 from 3 in the first 5 minutes of the game, while on the Knicks side, New York looked terrible offensively from the jump. I mean, they could not get anything to fall. RJ Barrett was really the only player that didn't look flustered offensively to begin the game. So it was really, really it was just tough to watch that Knicks offense to begin the game, but obviously they did eventually turn around later in the game. But I think one point well, first of all, I guess I could say this: New York shot 26% from the field and 14% from 3 in the first quarter. And it wasn't that they weren't getting good looks. It was really just their shots weren't falling, and that's kind of why I was thinking, okay, I think at some point they're going to be able to turn this around. But it was certainly concerning for New York to begin the game. And then defensively, I mean, Atlanta did a really good job defensively in that first half. I did just say New York, it's not like they weren't getting open looks, but at the same time, I mean, they limited. Julius Randle didn't have a single basket in the first quarter. And I think you can credit that to just the on-ball pressure that Atlanta applied to him, and then always having someone kind of clog the lane and clog his driving lanes to the basket. They obviously know his sweet spots, kind of in that mid-range area. He loves that pull-up mid-range and then just attacking the rim. And then if he did get to the rim, it was Capella who was there to send his shot away. Clint Capella, who has been really great as a rim protector for the Hawks all season. He had 5 blocks in this game. So overall, Atlanta did a really, really good job, kind of implementing their defensive game plan against Julius Randle for the most part. You got to credit that to Nate McMillan, their head coach, I would imagine. So, but one thing that New York struggled with is containing Atlanta's transition offense. Atlanta, and this is per NBA.com, is tied for 6th in the NBA in points per possession in transition at 1.13 points per possession, again, in transition. I saw that they run off both misses and makes, which is, it's just, that's what makes them so dangerous. Trae Young, he's really, really good, obviously, as a facilitator. He knows how to make outlet passes. He can make full court passes. If you don't get back in transition against this team, they're going to burn you, and that's exactly what was happening against the Knicks early on. But eventually they kind of figured that out, and there was even some plays down the stretch where the Knicks made a conceited effort to get back on defense and stop that transition game. But I guess another point that I noticed, and this is the point that I wanted to make at the beginning, I said playoff crowds. I wonder, this is something I wondered as I was watching this game. Do playoff crowds actually hinder home teams maybe it's just only this season, specifically speaking, home teams and teams that don't have a lot of experience in the playoffs, and obviously that would be the New York Knicks. And I'm interested to see how it could impact the Hawks. But the Knicks, they obviously don't have they have some younger players that obviously don't have a lot of playoff experience. And what made me kind of think of this question was there was a play where the Knicks were on a 7-0 run, I believe. And you have to remember, I should probably say this before I even mention what happened. So I looked on ESPN's NBA attendance report. The Knicks had an average attendance this season of about 1,500 or 1,600 people in MSG. And there are 15,000 fans in MSG or in attendance, or at least allowed for the playoffs. So this is a completely different atmosphere in Madison Square Garden. And you have to imagine how that kind of impacts a younger player. Obviously when the crowd gets into it, when it gets really loud and the place is bumping, they might take some ill-advised shots. And that's exactly what I saw on a few occasions, especially from the younger players. One incident in particular that I was about to mention, I believe the Knicks were mounting a comeback. As I mentioned, they were on a 7-0 run. And Emmanuel quickly kind of just pulled up about like 26 or 27 feet away from the basket, a pretty contested three, and kind of just took the air out of the building. And I'm pretty sure Atlanta might have went on to score on their next possession. So it's just like little things like that. I wonder how, if the place was empty, maybe they get into a set. Maybe Emmanuel quickly swings the ball and then the Knicks run their half-court offense. It was interesting. That's just like a small thing, and obviously it didn't impact the outcome of the game. The Knicks still won this game, but I don't know. It's just like one little thing that I mentioned that I thought of, as I was watching this game. But, yeah, in the first half, New York's offense was just completely atrocious, to say the least. They shot 29% from the field and 17% from three in the first half. And this is something that I thought could happen, where New York's defense, New York's defense this season has been among one of the best in the league. Obviously, everyone wants to credit that to head coach Tom Thibodeau and their rotation. The players that they play, they all play so hard on that end of the floor. So, but I kind of imagined that New York was going to be able to defend almost anyone in the playoffs, but when their offense is stagnant, that's when I thought they could get burned. And it looked like they could have lost this game if they didn't turn it around in the third quarter. And that's kind of something that they did. I mean, Atlanta's defense is not the worst defense in the league. They're pretty solid defense themselves. I mean, they have capable defenders all throughout their roster, so it's not like New York is just struggling to score against one of the worst defenses in the NBA. But New York, I feel like this offseason, I don't know how far New York is going to go in the playoffs, but I feel like this offseason they need to find a player who can help initiate some offense. Maybe that be a point guard or just, a star-studded free agent that can just get you a bucket whenever you need it, because at times it just looked like they had no one to go to offensively. So it was a tough game for New York, but they battled it out in the second half. That being said, Derrick Rose actually started the second half for the Knicks, and he scored a quick 5 points to kind of spark that offense. Obviously, the normal starter for New York is Elfrid Payton, who a lot of Knicks fans have mixed opinions about. I know Justin has a lot of mixed opinions about Elfrid Payton and whether or not he's deserving of a starting spot for the team. But, in that second half is really when I think, Derrick Rose obviously had a tremendous game. I didn't even mention his stat line. He had 26 points in this game, 4 rebounds and 4 assists, and 39 minutes off the bench. So he's basically playing starter minutes. He's off the bench, but he's basically a starter for New York. And then it was a tale of two halves for Julius Randle. I mentioned earlier, Atlanta did a really good job of containing Randle, not letting him get to the rim, not letting him, pull up in the mid-range and get to his sweet spots. In that second half, he really just became a different player and just got super aggressive. He looked a lot more comfortable as the third quarter went on, and he was attacking the basket. He wasn't afraid of getting his shot sent away from Clint Capella. And, as he was driving to the basket, he's also a very good facilitator for a power forward. So, he was driving and kicking out to his shooters. And in that third quarter, New York shot 7 of 10 from 3. And they ended the third quarter on a 16-5 run in the last 5 minutes and 30 seconds of that quarter. So New York definitely pulled it out there and did a tremendous job in that third quarter. Out of halftime, they did a really good job. They outscored the Hawks 32-18 in the third quarter. And that was really the turning point for New York in this game. And then the fourth quarter, their defense was incredible to start the fourth quarter. Trae Young was on the bench, so you kind of got to, I guess, take it with a grain of salt, because Trae Young was just phenomenal when he was on the floor for Atlanta. But it also, I feel like it definitely, you can tell how much of a difference Trae Young makes. And it's funny how a lot of people thought Trae Young wouldn't be able to perform as well as he does in the regular season, in the playoffs. But my gosh, Trae Young has been exceptional here in the first 2 games of this series for Atlanta. And you can tell, as soon as he came into the game, the Hawks went on a 9-0 run. I think he came in a little bit earlier than he normally does for, that rotation, that substitution rotation for Nate McMillan. But when he did come in, he was running the pick and roll with Clint Capella. He was obviously finding his open shooters. He was getting his own shot, attacking the lane, attacking the rim, and throwing up floaters like he does so well. It was a really good performance from Trae Young. He had 30 points and 7 assists, and and this is his second playoff game ever. And it was really incredible to see, the stark difference of what he brings when he's on the floor and when he's off the floor. So, it was a really, really good, fun game to watch. MSG, the atmosphere in there was electric. I can imagine. I mean, watching it on the TV, you could tell it was just so much fun. But I also just loved how chippy this game is. Like, I think this game is going to go 7 games. I can totally see this series going 7 games because of, I mean, it was just so back and forth. It was a game of runs, and again, I just loved how chippy this game was. There was one point where I can't remember who the double team or who the two players that were double teaming Trae Young. I know one of them was Reggie Bullock. I think maybe the other one was Alec Burks. There was one point in this game where it was a pretty physical double team, and Trae Young kind of just like ripped the ball away from Reggie Bullock after the whistle was blown, and you could tell he was frustrated because I think at that point he knew he was probably the Hawks were probably gonna lose that game, but it was very chippy, and I think Game 3 is gonna be very physical. I can imagine that game getting really physical. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a couple technicals in that game. This series has been one of the most entertaining series of the first round. I mean, this whole entire first round has been incredible, to be honest. I can't remember the last time a first round has been this exciting, if we're being honest. But a lot of really good matchups here in the first round of this year's playoffs. But again, the Knicks won this game 101-92. Game 3 now heading to Atlanta. It'll be interesting to see if the Knicks can bounce back with a better offensive performance. Again, not the best offensive performance outside of really Derrick Rose from New York, but I think if they can get a better performance from Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, I think needs to knock down his shots, be a little bit more efficient in Game 3, and I think New York could take Game 3. If not, Trae Young's going to keep doing what he's doing. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward in this series. But Game 2 was really a fun one to watch. But now moving on to the next game that I watched and the final game of the night, that being the Utah Jazz versus the Memphis Grizzlies. This was, again, Game 2 of this one. The Utah Jazz, they dropped the first game to this inexperienced. Well, honestly, actually, I think the first point I want to make is I don't think Memphis is as inexperienced as people are saying they are, because they have played in a lot of high leverage games, and their players in particular have played in a lot of high leverage games. You'd have to think like Ja Morant, before he even got to the NBA, he was playing in March Madness as a low seed at Murray State, going up against Marquette, I believe, in the first round, and he got that win, an upset win in March Madness. You have to think, like Dylan Brooks, when he was in college at Oregon, I don't know if he went to the Final Four with that Oregon team, but I know he's played in a lot of high leverage games. And then, like, even when they both get to the NBA, you have to remember, like, they've played in play-in tournament games. Like, those are high leverage games. They played in the play-in game in the bubble against the Portland Trailblazers last year, and then obviously they played 2 play-in games against the Spurs and the Golden State Warriors this year. So, I mean, yes, this is technically their first go-around in the playoffs as this kind of era or iteration of the Memphis Grizzlies. But this team, I feel like they're more prepared than people are giving them credit. But again, it's still incredible for a team this young. They are, I believe, the second youngest team in the NBA, only ahead of the Minnesota Timberwolves. For them to be battling the way that they are is really incredible. But the Utah Jazz bounced back here in Game 2, winning 141-129. So, yes, a very, very high-scoring game. I'm pretty sure the 141 points scored by Utah was the most points in franchise history in either a regular season or a playoff game, I believe. I would have to double-check that, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. And then, obviously, a huge storyline in this one was Donovan Mitchell, who had missed the last 17 games for Utah, made his return tonight, and he was pretty efficient. I mean, he was pretty good for a guy who hasn't played since, mid-April. He looked really, really solid in this game. He had 25 points in just 26 minutes. He was on a minutes restriction, and I think it was obviously they didn't want to play him over 30 minutes. So again, 25 points in 26 minutes, shot 8 for 19 from the field, 5 of 10 from 3. I mean, it was just instant offense for him, and that's exactly what Utah lacked in Game 1. They didn't really have that go-to scorer in Game 1, and their offense at times looked really stagnant with Bogdanovich really as their only option offensively, it looked like at times, and their threes were not falling in Game 1. In Game 1, they shot just 12 of 47 from 3, which is 26%. And you have to remember, Utah is one of the best three-point shooting teams in the NBA, or they were this season, and they came out in their first playoff game this postseason, shot 26% from 3. Well, in this game, in the first quarter alone, they shot 7 of 10 from 3. 7 of 10 from downtown in the first quarter alone. So, and then overall, they made 19 threes, shot 19 of 39 from downtown, which is 49%. So, again, a bounce-back game from Utah's offense. And, again, I think you have to credit that a lot to just the presence of Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell, I mean, he had 5 threes himself, and he actually made his first shot was a 3, a wide-open three-pointer, and that really kicked off the game for the Jazz. But, I mean, also in that first quarter, Memphis, kind of now transitioning over to Memphis a little bit, they dealt with a lot of foul trouble in that first quarter, and I think that's also what helped Utah really get out to a early lead in the first quarter. At the end of the first quarter, Utah led 36-27. But yes, as I was mentioning, Jonas Valanciunas picked up 2 quick fouls in just 4 minutes. He dealt with foul trouble in their last game. He had 5 fouls in Game 1, and somehow they still won. And then Dillon Brooks, who was really the primary defender on Donovan Mitchell in this game, he also picked up 2 fouls in the first quarter. And it was essentially on the same play. Not literally on the same play, but like it was the same play design where Donovan Mitchell would get a ball screen, and as Dillon Brooks was fighting through that ball screen, Donovan Mitchell would just stop in his place, pull up, and shoot, and he would draw the foul. You see that pretty often in the NBA nowadays. So I'm interested to see if Dillon Brooks is going to adjust the way he defends Donovan Mitchell now moving forward, if he goes back to the tape and see if that looks different in Game 3 now that this series is now going to Memphis. I'm interested to see if Dillon Brooks is going to defend him any differently. But yeah, I mean, Utah, just their offense was absolutely on fire in this game. They had 74 points in the first half, which was 31 more points than they did in Game 1. They just had 43 points in the first half of Game 1, and again, 74 here in Game 2. So it's just a completely different game from Utah. And this is exactly what I mean, this is if Utah can play like this, and I kind of want to spend the rest of the time just talking about Ja Morant. And I mean, I have a lot to say about Ja Morant, but I'll say this last point about Utah. If Utah plays like this, they have a legitimate shot of getting to the NBA Finals. Just based on the way all the other teams in the Western Conference have been performing thus far. Yes, they dropped Game 1, but, I mean, can you really... They probably should have won Game 1, and it came down to a final shot from Bogdanovich, but they also didn't have their star player in Donovan Mitchell. So you kind of have to give them some slack, but at the same time, they probably should have won that game. But if Utah can play like this, where Mike Conley had 20 points and 15 assists in this game. that pick and roll with Rudy Gobert is really a thing of beauty. I mean, last season, it seems like they didn't have the same they didn't have a really good chemistry on that pick and roll, or just really chemistry overall. Like Mike Conley, who playing in Memphis, was not really used to having a lob threat like Rudy Gobert. You know, he played with Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol, who are kind of, you know, below the rim players. They like to get the ball in the post and kind of work in the post, whereas Rudy Gobert is really just a rim running center, at least offensively. So it was a different. It probably took a lot of time adjusting to that. When you play with a certain center your entire career, it's a completely different. It's a completely different play style for Mike Conley now, and you see, it was really just one of their most efficient sets really throughout this entire game. Like Memphis really had no answer for it, and they just kept going to it, and they just kept racking up the points. Again, 15 assists for Mike Conley in this game. Rudy Gobert had 21 points, 13 rebounds, and 4 blocks in this game. Again, I mean, this was really just Utah at its peak. I mean, I think defensively they probably could have been a little bit better, but at the same time, I think you just got to credit that to Ja Morant's greatness, and again, I will get into that in a second. But overall, I mean, they had 6 players score in double figures. They had 6 players score more than 14 or more points in this game. This is Utah at its peak. And if Utah can play like this throughout the playoffs and have really good 3-point, be very efficient from the 3-point line throughout the playoffs, and obviously play good defense, you have to think that this team can get to the finals. Because and I think, again, Donovan Mitchell, his first game in over a month, I feel like he's only going to get more comfortable out there. And, you know, as they integrate him back into, I mean, it didn't look like they had any problem integrating him back into the lineup today, but you have to imagine it's only going to get better from here. So this was a really, really dominant performance from Utah, a statement win that they desperately needed. Because if they had somehow gone down 0-2 as the number 1 seed in the Western Conference, as the best team, essentially record-wise in the NBA, that would have definitely turned a lot of people off, their championship hopes. But this is a really good win for Utah. But now, the last couple of minutes, I just want to spend on Ja Morant. I'm sorry. I just want to get this out the way. I apologize for what I said on the Full Court Report with Justin on last week's show, because I was saying, Ja Morant, he had a career performance from 3. I believe he had 5 3-pointers in their win against the Golden State Warriors to get them into the playoffs in that play-in game against the Warriors. And I was saying, unless he can somehow replicate that throughout the playoffs, or at least in this series, I don't see him making much of an impact offensively, considering most of his points are going to be coming at the rim. Because Rudy Gobert is such a stout defensive presence for the Jazz, and I just can't see him dominating the game the way that he needs to for Memphis to really have a chance in this series. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong. I literally could not have been more wrong. Ja Morant had a career-high 47 points in this game, shot 15 of 26 from the field, 15 of 20 from the free throw line. I mean, Ja Morant was literally incredible in this game. Ja Morant, so they showed this on the broadcast, but it wasn't updated because the game was still ongoing. There were still about 8 minutes left in the game. But Ja Morant, and these are the updated stats now. Ja Morant, in NBA history, the most points in their first 2 career playoff games. Number 1, George Mikan, who had 75 points in his first 2 career playoff games. Number 2, Ja Morant. 73 points in his first 2 playoff games for Ja Morant. I mean, I'm speechless. Like, I really don't even know what to say. It's really incredible what he was doing today. I mean, he was absolutely fearless. His 47 points was obviously a career high for him, and it was also a playoff record for the Grizzlies for the most points in a playoff game. He's of the youngest players in NBA history to drop 40 points in a playoff game. He's 4th, only behind Magic Johnson, LeBron James, and Luka Doncic. He's only 21 years old, guys. He is. And I had a lot of praise for Ja Morant at the beginning of the season, saying that I think he's the future of the position, the future of the point guard position. I don't think I could have ever envisioned him being this dominant this early into his playoff career. And honestly, there's been a lot of really, really good playoff performers in their first go-arounds in the playoffs this year. I don't know what it is, but, we were just talking about Trae Young, who's been very, very good for the Atlanta Hawks thus far. And then, obviously, Ja Morant. Luka, it's not his first go-around, but this is only he's only played 8 playoff games in his career thus far, Luka Doncic, and he's dominating the Clippers as a member of the Dallas Mavericks, of course. I don't even know what to say. Ja Morant is incredible, and again, I said he would struggle against Gobert's rim protection, and I thought that was a reasonable thing to say, but he's just so good and so crafty around the rim, around the basket. He's so good at maneuvering and manipulating the basketball in midair that it's just so hard to even swat his shot away or even try and contest him. Like, he's just so good in the air, maneuvering his body, and sometimes it's to a fault, because if he just goes straight up and goes straight into the defender, he'll probably draw some more fouls. But then again, he did have 20 free throws in this game, so that you can't even say he wasn't drawing fouls. But it's really a thing of beauty. It's incredible to watch. And his floater game is one of the best in the league. Like, I don't know how he does it. He just stops on a dime, and regardless of who it is protecting the rim, he can somehow find a way to convert his floaters. It's really his offensive bag at this young of an age is incredible, and if he can get a reliable jump shot, even partially, if he can shoot something like 33 or 34%, like league average from 3, this guy is going to be a force. He already is, but he will be a force to be reckoned with moving forward throughout his career, because this game was arguably, it might be the best. It might be one of the best performances of the entire playoffs, even when it's all said and done. Because, my goodness, Ja Morant, hats off to you, man. Seriously, hats off to you. And I'm excited. This was they stole game 1, and it's entirely possible that it could just be a gentleman's sweep for the Utah Jazz. They drop game 1 and then they win the next 4. That's entirely possible. But I'm excited to watch the rest of this series. I think it'll be very competitive moving forward between these two teams. I just like how resilient the Grizzlies are. There was times during this game where I thought they looked gassed. I didn't know if they had the conditioning in them to really fight through as many deficits as they had during this game. But they always fought back. They never gave up till the end of this game. So I love the Grizzlies, man. They're such a fun team to watch. It's such a fun team to root for. And Ja Morant, again, I just cannot say enough good things about this man. He's really, really just an incredible player. But that being said, that's all I have. That's all the notes I have. This is probably the longest in the bonus episode. Again, it is 2 games that I had to cover, so I guess that makes sense. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun watching these games, and I'm excited to see what kind of games we have going on tomorrow. I believe Brooklyn plays again. No, excuse me. The Bucks will play again. The Nuggets will play again, and then the Lakers-Suns series. So those 3 games are going to be a lot of fun to watch. But thank you so much for listening, and stay safe, everyone.